Welcome to the second video of the Crazy Victorian Era series. Today I will talk to you about what it was like to have menstruation. In the Victorian era, the medical and cultural beliefs, the methods used to absorb the blood and against the pain, and everything that revolved around what still seemed like the mystery of the female cycle. First of all, one was not supposed to have their period before the age set by doctors. One was not supposed to, indeed. If it happened to occur earlier, it was better to hide it because suffering from early menstruation, it was considered a misfortune which inevitably brought illness and death and was caused by an excess of stimuli, such as going to the theater, having childhood crushes, listening to music. In the early 1800s, it is assumed that most women of lower social class did not wear anything to absorb the blood. This was also related to the fact that they had very few menstrual cycles due to frequent pregnancies and, for impoverished women, also due to malnutrition. If needed, they could use sheep's fleece, sea sponges inserted like a tampon, belts to hold rags, or simply keep the rags tightly between the thighs for noble women who didn't have much to do, apart from locking themselves in their rooms out of shame and waiting for the ordeal to end. To absorb the blood, the most sophisticated method, although not very widespread, was the menstrual belt. A belt tied around the waist with a clasp to which a strap could be attached to hold a fabric pad in place. Okay? Remember that their underwear was open in the middle of the thighs. If you want to know more, watch my video on the origin and history of underwear. These pads were not comfortable at all and often irritated the skin between the thighs, causing painful abrasions, and they were a hindrance when one had to urinate. These primordial pads were frequently washed and reused. In the past, the age of development and especially the first menstruation was later compared to today. Nowadays, girls have their menarche between the ages of 10 and 16, whereas in the 1700s and 1800s, the age was between 14 and 18. A couple of years after their first menstrual cycle, upper-class girls made their debut in society between the ages of 17 and 23. After this fateful birthday, the poor girl began to be considered a spinster, and her social decline began slowly. In the Victorian era, girls had their first menstruation on average at 13 and a half years old if they belonged to the affluent class, and at 14 and a half in the poor and working class, likely due to the poor nutrition of the lower classes. Doctors believed that the regularity of a woman's cycle was related to her mental health. Her body controlled her mind. One of the sources on which Victorian ideas about the menstrual cycle were based is the book Domestic Medicine by William Buchan. Forgive me, but I don't know how it's pronounced. He argued not only that menstruation was a disease, but he relegated women's health to the domestic sphere, as if it were not a serious medical issue. This doctor, like his contemporaries, believed that while a woman was menstruating, any exertion of the mind, whether intellectual or emotional, could be fatal to her, and therefore it was inadvisable to interrupt the menstrual flow. Women were therefore supposed to focus on easing their minds to allow their body's processes to function without being hindered by mental interference. They were prohibited from riding bicycles, using the sewing machine, and taking baths. I will later explain the reason behind this ancient prohibition against bathing during those days. Most women, however, did not have the luxury of lying on the couch for a couple of days just because of their period, so they continued to carry out their household duties despite the recommendations of the most distinguished doctors. In the Victorian era, menstruating women were not even allowed access to gardens, as it was believed they would cause the plants to wither. This belief persists even today. Medical texts stated that women were attracted to men only during the active period of their reproductive organs, that their sexual appetite was underdeveloped, and that it reached its peak precisely during menstruation. What luck, I would say. In accordance with the sexist mentality of the time, women were attractive to men only as incubators for reproduction and sexual activity, as it was practiced by men in the time of the Bible. The cessation of menstruation was considered a sign of aging, after which a woman lost her primary role as an incubator, and thus her value was further diminished. Since women were deemed incapable of controlling their health, it was consequently the responsibility of the father or the oldest male figure in the family, ensuring that a woman's cycle was regular and that there was nothing that could obstruct the menstrual flow. Theoretical doctors believed that the menstrual cycle was a kind of safety valve through which an excess of animal impulses could be discharged. They lowered women to the state of animals, claiming that the outflow of blood was considered the consequence of a peculiar and periodic condition in which the blood vessels of the uterus prepare it for insemination. This condition for them was analogous to the period of heat in lower animals. The physical manifestations of the reproductive function, the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, breastfeeding, and menopause. They were the most common biological justification used to limit women's participation in activities considered to be the exclusive domain of men, such as sports. The first advertisements focused on female menstruation emerged in this era, mostly for pills. Corrective pills that helped regulate the cycle, removing obstacles to the menstrual cycle and alleviating associated symptoms such as general discomfort, nervousness, dizziness, headaches, chest and stomach pain, and all hysterical and nervous behaviors. These were the only elements in newspapers that were directed at the female audience, or for women who could not read, to their husbands or fathers. These ads never directly mentioned menstruation or blood, but contained coded information dispensed by doctors, with authoritative language to evoke fear and insecurity. At that time, doctors believed that the four humors, blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, needed to be properly balanced and circulate in the body to maintain good health. So they thought that the menstrual cycle freed the female body from blood excess. If the blood did not flow but instead stagnated in the body, it could have caused all kinds of diseases. Now we know that the interruption of the menstrual cycle is a symptom of systemic diseases like tuberculosis and cancer, but at that time they thought it was the cause. So women avoided activities that they believed could interrupt the flow. The main precautions were to avoid getting cold, whether by bathing in cold water or working outside in cold and damp weather. What did Victorian women do to relieve menstrual cramps? They used drugs. Drugs like opium, cocaine, marijuana. Not only were they legal and vaguely regulated, but they were often part of the ingredients in medical prescriptions of the time. Women were commonly given drugs in response to so-called female complaints, particularly the pain associated with menstruation, childbirth, or female ailments like neuralgia and hysteria. They also used herbal medicines, but given the copious amount of alcohol they contained, I can't tell you if the relief was due to the herbs or the alcohol that numbed the pain. An even more radical treatment offered by an American doctor in 1872 was to surgically remove the ovaries, thus ending menstrual pain. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe, and activate the bell to stay updated on the Crazy Victorian Era series. See you next video, bye.